So I said this is the first webinar, actuator overview. We are going to go through all the Zennio actuators and most of the board elements or control elements. You can see in the screen the three different chats you can use. So you can you have My KNX Store, team@myknxstore.co.uk. General Zennio support, technical support in general, something, anything you may need from one of our devices, you can contact support@zennio.com, and support in the UK, specifically for the UK, in case you require anything from Zennio. That's an email I'll be getting, support@zennio.co.uk. So some general notes about our actuators. Our actuators, most of the new ones, or almost all the new ones, have 60 amps per output. So this is for the actuators, for the relay actuators. So that's mostly all the Maxim box family, and any other actuator, the inboxes, anything else that has a relay actuator, and those are compatible with capacitive loads. Just smaller. In multipurpose actuators, each output can be configured individually. So if you have a Maxim box 8, which is an 8 relay outputs actuator, you can configure 4 outputs for a Fan-Coil unit. So you could have 1 unit for each 4 outputs. Every 2 outputs for a starter channel, for example. So you could have up to 4 different starter channels, or every individual output for individual on-off controls. So as an example, in the case of the Maxim box, you could have 1 Fan-Coil unit plus 1 starter channel plus 2 individual outputs, and you could have all that configured in the same device. Analog digital inputs allow also binary connections. So it's not only for analog and digital inputs. You can have binary inputs, such as a regular switch, a push button, and they usually allow Zennio detectors, such as the DETEC family and the new Eisen family, and sometimes temperature probes. Temperature probes is the one that you will probably see in less devices. So there are some devices that do not allow temperature probes. Basically, the devices that are meant to control lighting. So the devices in the Zennio website that go for lighting, these do not allow temperature probes in the inputs. Our devices are quite standard in terms of size. So you have, depending if it's a DIN rail device, it will be either 2, 4.5, 8, or 12 DIN units. So you will see the biggest ones are, which is the all-in-box 1612 or the Maxim box 24. These are 12 DIN rail units. Maxim box 16 would be 8 DIN rail units. The Thonin box, for example, would be 4.5, and the Railquad 8, for example, would be 2 units. So it's always 2, 4.5, 8, and 12 DIN rail units. All lighting actuators, that is the dimming box family, the new narrow dim, the inbox dim, the Lumento, and the DALI box families, DALI box broadcast, DALI box, or DALI box interface. They all provide error detections, so you can actually know if there's an error with the load connected to the actuator. And there are some devices only for projects that have not been included here, but if you have a project, you can contact My KNX Store. They'll get in touch with us, and we can provide some specific devices for that are meant only to be used in projects. So we'll start with the newest family, or although it's been out in the market only for projects, as the case is for quite a while, and which is the all-in-box. There are 2 different all-in-boxes. There's the all-in-box 1612, 16 outputs and 12 inputs, and the all-in-box 88, 8 outputs, 8 inputs. All-in-box is a new concept in the KNX industry. It's not just an actuator. It's not just an actuator with inputs. It's a power supply unit with an IP interface with outputs and inputs. And it, of course, includes all the bits that we usually include in Zennio actuators, as the logic functions. In this case, even some thermostats. It has 4 Zennio thermostats plus 4 hospitality thermostats. Just to mention, hospitality thermostats are to be used mainly in hotel projects. You can try to figure it out how it works, but it doesn't give a lot of. It's not very useful in a residential project or in a commercial project, even, because it's very meant to be used in hotels. And you can, of course, if you download the BTS application program for the all-in-box, you can configure the hospitality thermostat, and you'll see there are a lot of strange things, to put it somehow, which is why it's only meant to be used with hotel and with very specific objects. But there it is, so you can take a look at it. In terms of the differences, all-in-box 1612, that's, as I said before, 12 unit DIN rail, 12 DIN rail modules. All-in-box 88 is 8 DIN rail modules, 16 outputs and 12 inputs in the 1612, 8 outputs, 8 inputs. So these are relays, 16 amp per relay. You can configure them as individual channels, so each output doing one thing, as a SATA channel, as a Fan-Coil unit, and this is a novelty. This is what happened with the hospitality, with the Maxim Box hospitality. It can work with 2 or 4 pipe Fan-Coil units. So you can have up to 2 4 pipes Fan-Coil units in the all-in-box 1612 and up to 1 4-pipe Fan-Coil unit in the all-in-box 88. And then, of course, you have the spare outputs. In terms of what the Fan-Coil to control is obviously 2 or 4 pipe with 3 relays for the speed. So speed controlled by relay, no 0 to 10 or something like that. It's relay controlled for the fan speed. Let me just 1 second because I see some. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry, my bad. Both of them have 20 up to 20 logical functions. And then, sorry, up to 20 logical functions. They can be controlled manually via an IR remote. So they do not have, as in the Maxim Box, for example, you do not have a button to press, but you can control it via an IR remote. All-in-box has 12 analog digital inputs, again, for temperature probe, for motion detector, for binary inputs. And the all-in-box 88 has 8 analog digital inputs. Both of them have 4 Zennio thermostats plus 4 hospitality thermostats. They can control up to 60 amps per relay output. They support capacitive loads. And another difference is the all-in-box 1612 has a 640 milliamp power supply, and the all-in-box 88 has a 320 milliamp power supply. So it's a bigger power supply for the all-in-box 1612. In terms of the IP interface, they both have an IP interface which works in the same way as the KIPI. So if you want to learn a bit more about that, you can go into the KIPI section, and it allows up to 5 connections at the same time. So you could have it in a BMS, for example. You could connect with your computer. You could, and up to 5 different Ethernet connections. Sorry, up to 5 interfaces, not a physical connection. Up to 5 interfaces in the IP interface. We now go. Sorry. To a specific actuator. So these are actuators that are not multi-purpose. These are some specific actuators which are not meant to control fan coils. This would be the Maxim Box shutter family. This is to control blinds or shutter channels. the SATO coupler, which is to be used. This is not a KNX device, just to mention. It is to be used with the maximum box shutter or with a SATO channel configured in a multipurpose actuator, and it's a converter from the relay output, the regular relay output, to a 12-24 volt blind control. And there's also the fanning box in two versions, 230 or 110 volt, which is to control ceiling fans. So a bit of how specific these are. So blind control and ceiling fan control. In terms of the output they use, the maximum box shutter, it's regular outputs, only that they cannot be configured as individual outputs, only as a SATO channel. And in the fanning box is discrete regulation relays, but again, it's just relays. Logic functions, maximum box shutter has 20, SATO coupler has none because it's not a KNX device, and 10 logic functions for the fanning box. Manual control in both devices, the maximum box shutter and the fanning box. Again, SATO coupler is just converting the control from the relays in the maximum box shutter, for example, to a 12-24. So manual control would be achieved through the maximum box shutter if using the SATO coupler. No inputs in any of them. Some more information about the specifics in each of these devices. The maximum box shutter, they have to come on live. So for every two outputs, they show it live, which is why they cannot be configured as individual outputs. SATO coupler, as I said, is a non-KNX device. And the fanning box can control ceiling fans between 30 and 100 watt. None of them has a thermostat for obvious reasons. And the maximum load per output, here there's a bit of a change regarding the other maximum boxes. This is 8 amp at 250 volt or 5 amp at 30 volt DC. And the SATO coupler is 8 amp, and the limitation with the fanning box would be set from 30 watt to 100 watt. We have the multipurpose actuators also, which are all of these actually don't have Fan-Coil logic. So we saw before the specific actuators that are not meant to control fan coils. Now we have the multipurpose actuators that do not have Fan-Coil logic, and we'll see later the ones that do have Fan-Coil logic. In case of the mini box, 2025 and the inboxes, they don't have the Fan-Coil logic because you could not control Fan-Coil logic with just two relays. And the maximum box 66 is just a matter of space. There was no space for the maximum for the Fan-Coil logic, so it doesn't have Fan-Coil logic. Maximum box 66, it has 6 relays. They can be configured as individual channels or SATO channel every 2 outputs. It has 10 logical functions. It has manual control just with the buttons. 6 analog digital inputs. In this case, for binary temperature probes and PIR detectors, Zennio PIR detectors. It has a master light functionality. Master light is a special control, just a bit of logic written for the integrators to make everybody's life easier. What it does, it's kind of an OR between the lights. So it's not only to work with the lights in the maximum box 66, so you can add other lights in your system, in your installation. And what it does, if any light in the installation is on, it turns every light off. If every light is off, then you can actually decide what lights will be turned on. It has 4 thermostats as well. And again, all of these are 60 amp per output. Minibox 20 is just two outputs and no inputs. It can be configured, each of them individually or as a SATO channel. 10 logical functions. Again, all of these have 10 logical functions. It allows manual control, again, with the 2 buttons. No inputs, no master light function, and no thermostat. Maximum box 25 version 2. which is adding the inputs to the Maxim Box 20. So it's adding 5 analog digital inputs. The relay part is the same, but it's adding the 5 analog digital inputs. It allows for master light functionality. It has a master light functionality, and it allows to configure 4 thermostats. And again, 16 amps per output. And the Inbox 20 and Inbox 24, these are not DIN rail devices, so these are to be installed in a back box, as they are quite small, so they fit a regular back box. 2 relays in each of them to be configured individually or as a SATA channel. 10 logical functions. It allows manual control. Inbox 20, no outputs. Inbox 24, 4 outputs. And for analog digital outputs. Both of them have, sorry, thank you, Vitor. 0 or 4 analog digital inputs. It allows, both of them have master light functionality. The Inbox 24 has 4 thermostats, so you can configure them as 4 thermostats, and in all of them, in both of them, it's a 60 amp per output. Then we go into the bigger ones, which are the multipurpose actuators, and now just with Fan-Coil logic. So these ones can actually control a Fan-Coil. They can be configured to control a Fan-Coil. In a similar way as we saw before the Inbox 20 and 24, we now have the Minibox 40 and 45 version 2. So 40 for outputs, 0 inputs, 45 4 outputs, 5 inputs. All of them relay outputs to be configured as an individual, as a SATA channel, each 2 of them, or as a Fan-Coil control. So this is only, all of those are only to control in the part of the Fan-Coil logic. They can only control a 2-pipe Fan-Coil unit. 10 logical functions. It allows manual control. It has 0 for the 40 or 5 inputs for the 45. 4 thermostats in the 45, and again 60 amps per output. ActUATORS Max 6 with the Fan-Coil application program. So this is a bit of a different one. This is, if you go into the Zennio website, you will see in the ActUATORS Max 6, it has 3 different application programs. One of them is Fan-Coil application program. So this would be the only case, and as you can see, it physically looks different because it's actually part of the old family of products, or quite old family of products, but it's still out there in the market. It's still being used. This is 6 relays and 10 amps per output, and this is the only one that allows 2 or 4 pipe Fan-Coil control. Again, depending on the application program, you can configure either individual channels or SATA channels for each 2. And if you select the Fan-Coil application program, you can then use, you can configure 1 Fan-Coil with either 2 or 4 pipe, either 2 or 4 pipe Fan-Coil unit. It has 5 logical functions, no manual control, no inputs, no thermostats. Again, this is part of the old products, but it's still out there in the market. We now jump to the Maxim Box 8 and 16. So kind of the same thing, just a bigger version. 8 outputs or 16 outputs. Each of them to be configured individually, or as each 2 of them as a SATA channel or to control a blind, and each 4 of them to control a Fan-Coil unit. It's just a 2-pipe, 3 relay for the speed Fan-Coil units. 20 logical functions. It allows manual control, no inputs, no thermostat, and we go again to the 16 amp, 16 amp output per relay output. Maxim Box 24, it's just a bigger version of the Maxim Box 8 or 16 version 3. So that's 24 relay outputs. So you can have 24 individual outputs, 12 SATA channels, or up to 6 Fan-Coils. So that would be 2-pipe two-pipe fan coils with 3 relays for the speed, 30 logical functions, so quite a lot of things that can be done there. It allows manual control for each output. It has no inputs, no thermostat, and again, 16 amp per output. Now we go into the specific fan coil controller. So we've seen the specific controllers which are not for fan coil, that would be control for ceiling fan or starter control. We went into the multipurpose actuators without fan coil logic. We just saw the multipurpose actuators with fan coil logic. And now these are the specific fan coil controllers. So these are meant to control a fan coil. So Maxim Box Hospitality, as I said, this would be something very similar to what we have in the all-in box in terms of the module. Sorry. It can control 2 or 4 pipe fan coils. Fan speed can be selected for, to control with 1, 2, or 3 relays. 2 valve controls, which is why it can control 4 pipes, and it can be 1 or 3 wire valve. Thermostat is external, so it has no built-in thermostat logic. Thermostat can work over the valve or the fan speed, and that's to be selected in parameters. Depending on the configuration, you will have 2 capacitive load outputs, 2 spare outputs to be used with capacitive loads, and 1 output for non-capacitive loads. So in terms of construction, it has these 2 outputs that are meant to control a valve, and one of them, if you select a 2-pipe fan coil, that other output that is meant to control a valve is the one that cannot be used to control a capacitive load. And it has 6 analog digital inputs, and it has 10 logical functions. Maxim Box fan coil, 2-channel 2 pipes and 4-channel 2 pipes. That's the 2CH2P, so 2-channel 2 pipes or 4-channel 2 pipes. But all of them is so Maxim Box fan coil 2CH or 4CH2P. That's only to work with 2-pipe fan coil units. 3 relays for each fan coil speed control. Valve control is for just 1 on-off valve. External thermostat, so no built thermostat logic. Thermostat can work over the valve or the fan speed. No spare outputs because it's using 4 outputs per fan coil, 1 for the valve and 3 for the fan speed. No inputs and 20 logical functions in both of them. And then we go into the Maxim Box fan coil 0 to 10 volt, fan and valve. So the only difference here is that fan is the 0 to 10 volt control is to control the fan speed, and in the valve, the 0 to 10 volt is to control the valve. Both of them can work with 2 or 4 pipe fan coils. Fan speed control in the 0 to 10 volt fan is 0 to 10 volt control, and in the 0 to 10 volt valve is to relay. Sorry, let me just. Yeah. And sorry, so valve control, 4 outputs for valve control in the Maxim Box 0 to 10 volt fan, and 2 0 to 10 volt valves in the 0 to 10 volt valve. Both of them have 2 thermostats, thermostat over the fan speed for the Maxim Box 0 to 10 volt fan, and over the valve in the 0 to 10 volt valve. So the 0 to 10 volt control, as said, would control the fan speed in the 0 to 10 volt fan, and the valve opening, how open the valve is in the 0 to 10 volt valve. Spare outputs up to 3 in both of them, and that depends on configuration. So if you selected 1 valve with the 0 to 10 volt control in the 0 to 10 volt fan, you would have 3 spare outputs to use. 4 inputs in each of them, and they both have 10 logical functions. And now we change a little bit and we go into the heating valve control. So we were saying, referring to the Fan-Coil control before, and this is the heating valves. So usually for radiators and underfloor heating. Of course, you could use any spare output, spare relay output in the Maxim box in the multipurpose actuators, as if they are on-off valves. So you could use any of those relays, any of those spare relay outputs as a valve control. And we also have the heating box. So the heating box is specific for valve control. It's not a relay, so it's a triac in the 230 version and a MOSFET in 24-volt version. Both of them, triacs and MOSFETs, are just electronic relays. So you don't get the clack clack, you don't actually hear it because it's electronic. Life is much longer for triacs and MOSFETs, and this is because it's meant to, it's a bit slower, it allows less capacity, so you can see here it's 2.5 amps or 6 amps, but life is much longer. So if you are looking to control a radiator or an underfloor heating with PWM control, for example, you can have thousands of switches in a day, or in a week probably. So you don't want to use a relay for that. You probably want to go into an electronic relay rather than a mechanical relay. And that's why we have this heating box, 230 volt and 24 volt. They both have a version with 4 outputs and 8 outputs. Up to 5 valves per output, or maximum capacity, so 200 milliamps per output, or 1 amp per output in the 24-volt version. So you will have to look if your valves have a rated current of 100 milliamps, for example. You could not connect 5, you would have to go for only 1 of them. So heating box 230 volt to work with 230 volt valves. Heating box 24 volt to work with 24 volt alternate or direct current valves. Both of them, so the 8 version, the 8 and the 4 version have 4 or 8 thermostats each. So heating box 230 volt 4 and heating box 24 volt 4, they have 4 thermostats, and the heating box 238 and the 24 8 have 8 thermostats. And as I was saying before, a bit of a difference in the rated current. For the 230 volt, you will have 200 milliamps and an inrush current of 2.5 amps. So much less than the 16 amps we were saying before. And again, because this is not a relay, this is an electronic relay. And in the heating box 24, you have up to 1 amp for the rated current and 6 amp inrush current. And we now go into the specific light control. So this would be direct light control. Either inbox dim is 230, and I don't know. Yeah, sorry about that. So inbox dim is meant to work with 230 volt controllers or 110 volt control, but it's a universal dimmer. Lumento family is, we have the Lumento X, which is to work with constant voltage LED strips. Lumento C, which is to work with constant current. So Lumento X for constant voltage, Lumento C for constant current LED strips, and Lumento DX, which is again for constant voltage, but a bit bigger, with up to 6 amps per channel. So going to each of them, the inbox dim, as I said, is a universal dimmer for RLC, LED, or CFL loads. Just 1 output. So again, this is kind of like the previous inbox 20 we were seeing before. It's meant to be installed in a back box. It's not a dim rail device. It allows manual control with the buttons. It has two inputs, so two analog digital inputs. In this case, for example, the inputs are not to be used with a temperature probe, so just a binary input or a PIR detector. It fits the standard back box, as I said. No bridge because it's just one output, so nothing to bridge. And the max load per output would be 250 watt. Lumento X, as I was saying, is a constant voltage controller from 12 to 24 volt. Sorry, actually not from 12 to 24, either 12 or 24 volt control. Lumento X3, 3 LEDs, and Lumento X4, 4 LEDs. They can control RGB or RGBW in Lumento X4. So they allow manual control, a bit different here. So it's not individual control, it's a test button which controls each channel individually. In this case, you actually, so there is a the same application program. You select whether you want to control RGB, RGBW, or individual outputs. As said, this is for constant voltage LEDs. Bridge is allowed in this case, so you can bridge 3 or the 4 outputs to achieve 7.5 or 10 amps in each output. And the max load per output would be at 2.5 amps. Lumento C, again, the difference is this is meant to work with constant current LED strips, up to 30 volt DC, 3 or 4 independent channels. A bit of a difference here, they have an independent application program if it's RGB, RGBW, or in the color control, or even individual outputs. So you want to check in the website the program you want to use. They allow, again, manual control. They are meant to work with constant current LEDs. Just to mention, they have a selector. So you have to select by parameters, and you have to select hardware in the device, what current you actually want to have in your outputs. And the maximum load per outputs, no bridge allowed here, and maximum load per output is 1 amp, so 1000 milliamps. And Lumento DX4 would be just a bigger version of the Lumento X4. RGBW 12 to 30, in this case, yes, 12 to 30. So depending on the on your power supply, it will work with it. Or for independent LEDs. For outputs, well, type of relay, it's just a solid state switching. So just to mention, manual control, yes, and in this case, it's individual buttons for the manual control. It has 6 analog digital inputs, but it does not allow the temperature probe. This is again meant to work with constant voltage LEDs. And in this case, the bridge is also allowed to achieve up to 24 volt, 24 amp and if you bridge all the 4 outputs. And the maximum load per output would be 6 amps. So that's actually 180 watt if you're working at 30 volts with LEDs. More lighting control, we have the narrow dim here, which is a universal dimmer with 4 outputs. Works in a very similar way to the inbox dim. This is a 4.5 dim rail modules device. So a very powerful device. It's quite new. It came out at the beginning of the year, I think March, around March, April. So it's universal dimmer in 4-channel universal dimmer in 4.5 dim rail units. Just to mention, you can see it has, you don't have to actually bridge the live. So connection in this device is quite simple. You just have live to each device and the input, live and neutral input. So just 6 screws to actually to actually wire in the device. Very easy to install and very easy to test because it has, again, the manual control. So a very powerful device here. 10 logical functions. It allows manual control, as I said. It can work with 230 volt or 110 volt lights. You can actually bridge the 4 channels to achieve up to 750 watt, and the maximum load per output at 230 volt is 210 watt. So it's quite a powerful device for well, for LED, for example. Although it's a universal dimmer, it's very powerful for LEDs. We now go into the dimming box, which was the previous version to the narrow dim. You can see these are bigger. So the 1 channel is to dim rail units, the 2 channel is 4.5 dim rail modules, and the 4 channel, so dimming box DX4 is a 4 channel universal dimmer, but that's 8 modules. In terms of how they work compared to the narrow dim, they work very similar way. The main difference is the dimming boxes have a relay, a built-in relay. So you have, so it actually turns the load completely out when turned off. This is very useful, for example, if you experience ghosting issues. Sometimes when you are controlling an LED light with probably a very low wattage, some 5 wattage LED lamps, you can have ghosting. Just to mention, I tested it myself with the narrow dim with not a lot of issues, so just some very, very cheap lights would give issues. But in case you have those in your installation and you want to make sure you turn the load completely off, then you will have to step to the dimming box, which are again bigger, but they have the relay, thus guaranteeing that the load is turned completely off. Universal dimmer, I said 1, 2, or 4 channels. So DX1, 1 channel, DX2, 2 channels, and DX4, 4 channels. 10 logical functions in the device. It allows, again, manual control. Wiring in this device is as simple as in the narrow dim. The dimming box DX2 actually has 2, analog digital inputs. As I was saying before, they all have built-in relays, and channels can be bridged up to 1,200 watt, which, and in terms of each output, dimming box DX1 would allow 350 watt per output, dimming box DX2 310 watt per output, and dimming box DX4 300 watt per output. So again, quite powerful if going to control LEDs. DALI box broadcast is a broadcast control for DALI. It's not a DALI interface, so it's a DALI broadcast control. Broadcast is you can connect to each output up to 20 DALI ballasts, and you would be controlling all the DALI ballasts connected to that. So it's to control by broadcast DALI lines, to put it that way. So up to 80 DALI ballasts in the DALI box 4, up to 120 DALI ballasts in the DALI box 6. So again, 20 DALI ballasts per output. It's to work with, it's a DALI output. It allows manual control of, again, broadcast control of each line, each DALI line you are connecting to the device. Bridge is not allowed, so you cannot have all of them broadcasting the same, but you can actually, if you have 20, 20, 20, 20 in each line, you could control them with the same ETS object or KNX object. So although bridge is not allowed, you can bridge it in the programming and control all of them at the same time. And the maximum load per output, as I was saying before, it's 20 DALI ballasts or ECGs. And DALI box interface, the difference with the DALI box broadcast is that it's actually interfacing with the DALI installation. Again, limitation because of the because it's DALI, 64 ECGs in 32 groups. So this is DALI 1. We are currently developing DALI box interface version 2 to work with DALI 2, but that's currently under development. It allows manual control here just by individual for every individual ballast. You can see it has a small screen here, so you can actually see what device you are controlling. It allows, well, it controls DALI groups, and that's again DALI. Bridge is not allowed. It has just one DALI output, and it can control up to 64 DALI ballast or ECGs. And now we go into a bit of a different thing, which are the HVAC interfaces. So we've seen before the Fan-Coil controllers or multipurpose actuators with Fan-Coil logic. So these are to control fan coils with relays or with 0 to 10 volt controls, 0 to 10 volt fan speed or 0 to 10 volt valves. And now we have direct interfaces to HVAC systems or to HVAC units. Usually AC units. So we have interfaces, direct interfaces for Daikin. That's 3 different products. We've got Daikin DD for residential, Daikin Click DI for commercial units, and Daikin Click DA Alterma low temperature. And now compatible also with Alterma 3. Just to mention, for all of this, there is a compatibility table in the Zennio website. You can download and look at your at the unit you actually want to control. So if you've got a Daikin, whatever model, you can go into the compatibility table and check the compatibility of our KNX interface with your Daikin unit. Also, Panasonic Click PA. So you are probably noticing that it's all Click. Click, it's just the name we give to the interfaces, to the AC interfaces. We've got an interface for Toshiba, Click TS, an interface for Fujitsu, Click FJ. It includes all the Fujitsu family, so that's General, Haiyasu, Fuji Electric, and a couple more, I believe. Mitsubishi, we have Click Meet version 2, which is for AC interface, and Click Meet E for Mitsubishi Ekodan units. We've got interface for LG, that's Click LG 1. Well, that's we put the 1 there. And then we also have IR controls for interface via IR control. If you cannot have an interface with, so these, the previous, all the clicks, sorry, are direct interfaces. So they allow bidirectional communication with the AC unit or with the Ekodan or with the Alterma. If this is not a possibility for whatever reason, then we also have an IR control called IRC. And there are 2 different application programs. It's the same device. We've got IRC Plus, which has the configuration of IRC Plus is very simple. You just select a parameter. It has 2 different versions of the application program, just because we cannot have all the units included in one of them. And it has over 300 implemented units or implemented IR remotes. So in terms of the IR control, what you want to emulate is the IR remote itself. So you don't emulate or you don't communicate with the unit because of what unit it is. You communicate with the same parameters, IR parameters, the remote would have. So we have the IRC Plus version, which is a device with the 300 implemented controllers. So if you have an IR remote for a brand that is not here, for example, well, we've got all the big ones, but any AC unit where you have the remote control and you don't have an interface for it, you can send us the remote. You can check there's a compatibility of what units are usually controlled, what remotes we have in IRC Plus. So you can check your remote. If it's in our compatibility table, then it will do the same thing your remote is doing. And you just select what parameter. So let's say, for example, I want to control a Panasonic unit. I had the remote control. I get an IRC Plus, and I just select parameter 125, which is the parameter for Panasonic. So quite simple there. And there is another version, which is IRC Open, which is where you just write the IR strings in the device. So this, so you create the remote yourself. I think we are done. So we've seen, just to make a small, to go through it all again, we've seen the all-in-box, again, a device with a power supply, IP interface, outputs and inputs, a specific specific actuators not for fan coils, multi-purpose actuators without the fan coil logic, multi-purpose actuators with the fan coil logic, a specific fan coil controllers, 0 to 10 volt or relays, heating valve control, which are the heating boxes, a specific light control all the way from the inbox dim, Lumento for LEDs, narrow dim, dimming box, which is again universal dimmer but with built-in relay, DALI box for DALI broadcast or DALI interface, and the clicks and the IRC for AC interface. And now I'll